Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. John Keir with you as always. And joining me is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It's Season 4, Episode 15. The NFL Draft is officially in the books. It's Tuesday, April 30th, about to flip the calendar to May, and we have completed the big noteworthy event in the NFL offseason. Now we can turn our attention towards training camp in the coming months, rookie mini camps, organized team activities, or optional team activities, if you will. But it's one of the most exciting few days in the NFL offseason is over. Just your quick reactions, Austin, your thoughts on another entertaining NFL draft.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid draft. It was a record-setting for trades, blowing out both 2017 and 2018 with how many trades happened, and it makes it interesting. I think that's like the best part of the NFL draft, seeing all the trades happen, who's trading up, who's trading back, for what, seeing the Seahawks never make a first-round pick because they hate them for whatever reason. It's all fun. I like this draft. It was pretty fun to monitor.
Now, you mean trades overall in the draft or in the first round?
Oh, overall, I love them all. I love seeing what teams are trading up for what. Like, what do they want? What do they see? What's that guy that they want that they think is so important that they need to trade up? It's always interesting to me. I like because I think there's like extra pressure on guys that teams trade up for, even if they're not in like the first round. If someone's trading up for you in the fourth, it means something. It means that they see something in you that maybe they didn't think this guy would be around in the fourth and that he is better than that. So it puts pressure on him. I like that. I like the trades. It makes it interesting.
And how many trades in total were there this year compared to other years? I
believe it was 38, but I don't remember. It was record-setting, that's for sure. I remember reading the tweet that said this was the most of any draft. I believe it was 38 draft day trades.
And there was not a single one until pick 10, and we'll get there in a moment. But the first round started, and the big smokescreen of the Cardinals not being interested in Kyler Murray was for naught, as I thought it was. The Cardinals still take him number 1 overall. I quite frankly wasn't surprised. I don't know if you were, but there it is, the Cardinals starting over just 1 year after trading up for drafting Josh Rosen.
I was hoping for better. I really wanted more for Larry Fitzgerald, because I love Larry Fitzgerald, man. I wanted it to be better. But their management is just they're just not good. They should have fired Steve Keim, and I've said this several times. There's no justification for keeping a GM that traded up for a quarterback in the first round the year before and then bringing in a head coach that doesn't want to keep that quarterback that was just drafted. It makes no sense. This was a complete and utter failure, and just it's mental. It's just absolutely crazy that the Cardinals would do this. This is unprecedented. A team has never moved on from a first-round quarterback in just 1 year. This is the only time it's happened in NFL history. And it just shows you how defunct that this group is. And I really think that holding on to Keim was a mistake. You can't keep the same general manager for that traded up for the Josh Rosen in the first place and then get Kyler Murray number 1. It doesn't make sense. They should have fired Keim, and then it would have made sense that, okay, the new regiment wants a new quarterback because they weren't in love with Rosen. They didn't draft Rosen. I would still be against that, but I would understand. But somehow they messed it up so that they had two guys that weren't on the same page, and now they got scraps for a guy that they had to trade up for and pay for. They got, a second round for it? They got a second-round pick. It was the Saints' second-round pick, too. It wasn't even the Dolphins, because the Dolphins are smart. The Dolphins had a really good move. They moved back with the Saints and then traded that pick. And then, what's it called? They didn't even get just a straight-up second round. They had to give up a fifth round and Josh Rosen to get that second-round pick. Complete and utter failure. Just there's nothing I could say more. I don't know how how Keim has a job. I think he should be fired, and it's just utterly mistaken. And this is coming from someone that loves Kyler Murray. I think after watching, because I looked at Kyler Murray pre-draft, I think he was going to work out. So I started feeling a little bit. At first, if I sound harsh now, I was harsh before because I didn't know anything about Murray before I looked at him. I just thought it was completely stupid. I felt a little bit better after looking at Murray because I was like, well, this guy does look like he's going to be a really great quarterback. But still, you can't. It's just the Cardinals are a complete and utter failure, and there's no other way to put it.
And you know what? What really doesn't matter who the quarterback is he's going to be under a ton of pressure regardless. And I think Murray's going to be running for his life back there this year. That's still one of, if not the worst football team in the league.
What's even worse, it's just to prove that management's even worse, they just decided to load up on wide receivers. I don't understand that. They drafted 3. They drafted 3 wide receivers, and you know how many offensive linemen they drafted? Can you take a guess?
0. I'll take 0.
It is 0. They drafted 0 linemen when they had one of the worst lines in the NFL. So they only helped Murray in the passing game when they already had wide receivers. They had Larry Fitzgerald still for probably one more year. I mean, he's older, so maybe he's not going to contribute as much, but he's still not the worst in the world, even at his old age. He's still a pretty solid receiver. And then his name, I can't think of his name.
Christian Kirk.
What's the guy they drafted last year in the second round early?
Christian Kirk. Christian
Who?
Kirk?
Oh, yeah, him. Yep. So they have him as well. So they didn't even need wide receiver, but they drafted 3 of them. That's ridiculous. An overkill. They needed offensive line depth, and I just want to continue saying that the Cardinals are a failure. It's really, they had one of they're like the new Browns to me. They're just really bad.
So let's wrap up the whole Rosen to the Dolphins. Let's look at his from his perspective here. He goes to a new team. It's him and Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I have to imagine that he's going to get the look at quarterback now as the Dolphins try to figure out if they want to keep him for the long term or if they want to try to tank for one of the quarterbacks in next year's draft.
I think the Dolphins should roll with Rosen. I don't think Rosen was given a proper chance, and what sucks is that the Dolphins are kind of how do I put it in nice terms? They're kind of in a bad state as well. But one thing I want to correct. I said the Cardinals didn't draft offensive linemen. They drafted 2, but in round 6 and 7, and that's ridiculous. So I just wanted to correct that. But regardless, going back to the Dolphins, I think that the Dolphins played it perfectly, and now they have a quarterback that if they give him a chance should last at least 3 years, and maybe with some more competent coaches, he could succeed. I don't know if it's much better there. I think the offensive line is better with the Dolphins, but he still doesn't have a very good supporting cast in Miami.
No, definitely not. But that is the hand that Rosen has been dealt, and he'll definitely be motivated as ever to prove the Cardinals and Steve Keim wrong. So pretty straightforward from that point out, at least for the next 2 picks. Nick Bosa to the Niners, Quinnen Williams to the Jets, even though the Jets wanted to trade out for some reason. The Raiders, they said they were the rumors were that they were going to take a surprise name at number 4, and they sure did, with Clelin Ferrell, a guy that had been linked to the Steelers and possibly even later, perhaps a late first-round pick. The Raiders took him at number 4. I thought Ferrell was a good player, but I thought that 4 was kind of early for him. But trademark John Gruden, Mike Mayock move, certainly a shocker.
Yeah, I think that they ideally should have traded down. I think they would have had partners. Miami still didn't have a quarterback at the time, so Miami could have wanted a quarterback. Same with the Redskins. They could have traded down with the Redskins. I was just more shocked that they didn't take Josh Allen. Josh Allen is, in my opinion, better than Clelin Ferrell. And I understand that he has some, personal issues like that. I forget what he has. He did really bad in interviews, I heard, but regardless, he's still a really good player on the field. So I don't know. I think the Raiders messed that one up. I think they either should have traded down or they should have taken Josh Allen because Josh Allen's such a good player. But it is what it is.
And then the Buccaneers took Devin White at 5, and Josh Allen fell to the Jaguars at number 7. T.J. Hawkinson at 8 to the Lions. And then Ed Oliver falls to Buffalo which was another good pick for the Bills. And then at 10, the Steelers made a trade with the Denver Broncos, kind of a shocking move. We knew the Steelers were trying to trade into the early part of the first round. Now, at what point did you get out of the movie theater? I'm trying to remember exactly when, because I remember this was after Daniel Jones had gone to the Giants, which I don't know if you want to say anything about that. I mean, I'll just, real quickly about Jones. I don't have a problem taking a quarterback with your first pick, but knowing what it seems like everyone knows about Jones and the kind of player he is compared to the other quarterbacks, he had better work out.
Yeah, no, this was a mistake, and I think Dwayne Haskins is going to beat up on them for years to come while Daniel Jones just gets messed up, because he wasn't even good. He lost really bad games to really bad teams, so I don't know. I'm not a big fan of him. But, yeah.
Were you out when I'm pretty sure you were out of the movie theater because you were watching the new Marvel movie before the draft. What were you out before the Steelers made their first pick?
Yeah, I actually was out just in time. I was out just in time for because I was texting you, and I just made it out when it was announced the Steelers traded up with Denver. Denver was on the clock when I got out, when I was able to look at my phone.
Okay, so I'm sure you know by now that the Broncos were targeting Noah Fant and figured that they'd be able to get him at pick 20 later in the first round, and we already know the Steelers were wanting to move up. So the Steelers sent, obviously they swapped first rounders, and the Steelers sent them pick number 52 from this year and a third rounder next year to move up to 10, where they picked the highly coveted Devin Bush. So real quickly, as far as what they gave up, I thought that was a decent return, if you will, only having to give up a second rounder this year and a third rounder next year to get a guy that could potentially be a starter on this defense for a decade.
I love it. I was absolutely in love when I found out to move up all the way into the top 10 is not a cheap deal usually. And what I felt like the Steelers gave up was perfect. The second round pick, it was necessary. And the third round next year, I don't even care about. The Steelers are almost guaranteed to get a comp pick in the third round because of Le'Veon Bell and Jesse James leaving. So I was happy with that, and I think that's how the Steelers played. The Steelers played that they knew they're going to get a third round comp pick from those signings, and it's just like I guess it's sad you don't have the extra third, but it's almost like you never had it. In the first place. So I loved it. I loved trading up for Devin Bush. I think he's going to be great. And, I mean, in the past, when the Steelers have traded up in the first round, it's only happened, like, twice in recent years, but it worked out pretty well both times with Troy Polamalu and Santonio Holmes. So if they thought that Devin Bush was worth trading up for, I'm going to take their word for it.
Indeed, and let's talk a little bit about Bush here for a few minutes. So, I mean, we had at-length discussions about Bush, off the air in the past, and we obviously talked a lot about him in our last pre-draft episode before the first round. Bush is, again, the big concern with him is size. At just 5'11" and 234 pounds. But, I mean, you've seen him on tape. I watched 4 games of his this past year. He's built really well inside that frame. He's a fantastic athlete, and he hits. He's a good blitzer. He's definitely got room to improve. And, again, the size limitations are a bit concerning. But I think that, again, like you said, the Steelers trading up for guys, it doesn't happen often. And I think this is a guy that could really, I don't know if he'll be, a Pro Bowl or Hall of Famer level, but I think he could have a chance to be a really good player on this defense for years to come.
I agree. I think Devin Bush is going to work out really well. Now I'm wondering if he's going to start immediately. It's going to be interesting to see how he does in camp versus Mark Barron for, I'm guessing, the other two spots. I mean, I guess I can't rule out that Barron and Bush could start together and Vince Williams could be benched if they choose to have two athletic linebackers. But, I mean, I feel like Vince is going to be the starter, and then on the other side it's either Bush or Barron. But still, I think that Bush is going to work out perfectly. And like you said, I don't know if he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I don't know if he's going to even be a Pro Bowler, but I think he's going to be a pretty solid player in Pittsburgh for at least a little while. I can't see him busting. And as I say that, I feel it. I feel looking up in 2 months, not 2 months, in 5 months, and seeing that all Yinzers are complaining that Devin Bush is the worst. But regardless, I think Devin Bush is going to work out.
And I lost my train of thought there for a second, but I really do like the pick. It's something that really speaks to what the Steelers learned a lesson from last year and not being able to pick one of those inside linebackers. And they've acknowledged as much this year that they didn't do enough to replace Ryan Shazier, and they went up and they made a big move. This is the first time they've had a top 10 pick in the draft since 2000, which was Kevin Colbert's first year as the GM when they selected Plexico Burress, to give you an idea of how long it's been. And at that point, the Steelers finished there because they were 6-10 in 1999. I mean, it's been a long time since the Steelers have had a pick that early in the round, that early in the first round. And I think it just speaks to how well the Steelers typically draft to be able to stay competitive and stay at the mid to higher end of the draft every year.
Yeah, because they're not even really active in the free agent market. I mean, this year was a little different. They actually did get much more active than normal, but normally they aren't even active in the free agent market until like the 5th day where they pick up some backup guy. I'm thinking of how you said that they realized their mistakes from last year. They ended up cutting John Bostic because of the drafting of Devin Bush, literally the day after the draft. So they really learned their lesson that they needed a better replacement for Ryan Shazier.
All right, well, let's transition to Bostic then real quick. So a guy that started 14 games last year was brought in with a 2-year, $4 million contract. Look, when you draft 2 inside linebackers, it doesn't bode well. I have a feeling that Bostic and his agent were probably asking to get released as well. I didn't feel like Bostic was bad. I just, the problem is he's just not a sideline-to-sideline guy. He's too similar to Vince Williams in that sense, and we already know that they needed someone that was faster, and he couldn't provide what the Steelers needed.
Yeah, no, I think it was mutual as well. And like you said, it wasn't that John Bostic was bad. John Bostic did okay, but he just wasn't similar to Shazier. And the Steelers should have done a better job of getting a guy that was more like Shazier. But that being said, I think Bostic's going to end up with the Ravens 100%. I think it's a really good fit for them because they need a C.J. Mosley type linebacker and John Bostic's closer to that. And there were complaints like Pittsburgh last year that the Ravens didn't address their inside linebacker position during the draft. I know you sent me that article on Twitter. So I think John Bostic's going to end up with a division rival, but just like Morgan Burnett. But it really be like that sometimes.
It's interesting because I wish Bostic well. I certainly have no ill will towards him. There were times, especially early on in the year, I felt like he was the best player on defense. But again, linebackers like him are going by the wayside quickly. But in any case, back to the original point, I remember what I was thinking. I don't think the Steelers are going to take Vince Williams off the field, at least not as a starter for most of the time, because he is the guy with the green dot. He's the guy that communicates and gets the play calls. I don't think the Steelers are going to take him off the field because he has experience doing that. And I would like to note that Devin Bush was a guy that communicated a lot and communicated well at Michigan, but we know that it's typically tough for Steelers rookies on the defensive side to pick up the defense quickly. So I feel like it is going to be Barron and Vince Williams to start, but I think it's going to be really hard to keep Devin Bush off the field.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you can't. It's a top 10 pick. You typically top 10 picks are basically starting almost immediately, and really we've seen the Steelers deploy later round picks, like let's say T.J. Watt, almost immediately as well. So, and Terrell Edmonds was forced into starting immediately. So I won't be surprised to see Devin Bush very early on.
Agreed. In this case, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing either. Just one last thing on Bostic. The Steelers are saving $1.8 million in cap space, but they're incurring a charge of $700K in dead cap, so that's just under $1.2 million they'll be saving. But I think it was a move that kind of had to be made, and again, I think we were led to believe that it was a mutual move for both sides. So,
yes, sir.
Was there anything else you wanted to add before we move on to the rest of round one?
No, I just want to say I do like the move still. That's basically it.
All right. So the rest of the first round, as was the case a few years ago, the Bengals took the guy the Steelers really wanted in William Jackson III. The Steelers jump in front of the Bengals and pick Devin Bush, so they settle with an offensive lineman. Not a whole lot going on. The Redskins managed to get Dwayne Haskins, the guy they really wanted. He falls right into their laps, which was kind of interesting. And then the aforementioned Broncos take Noah Fant. Darnell Savage might have been the surprise of the first round going at pick 21, but I think he had been gaining steam the last couple weeks, so seeing him in the first round wasn't a complete shock to me.
Yeah, he reminds me of Jabril Peppers coming out, because Jabril Peppers was basically the same guy. And what's funny is they have the same exact comparisons. Both guys are called the Swiss Army knife because they do everything. So it made sense that he went early because he has so much in his toolbox that he can do. He can play the linebacker position. He can play the safety position. He's a Swiss Army knife. I don't know if being compared to Jabril Peppers is the best thing, but that's basically what he's like.
Getting into the later portions of the first round, the Raiders, with their second first-round pick, take the first running back in Josh Jacobs, and it was a need, and he was the best running back available. But again, this was a weak running back draft class. I'm not sure Jacobs needed to go this early.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like I guess the Raiders could have probably double dipped at edge rusher, but I'm trying to think of who was there. You know what Raiders probably should have done? They probably should have gotten a cornerback there, but I mean, they got their cornerback not too much later.
Indeed. The Ravens, though, with the next pick, took Antonio Brown's cousin, Marquise Hollywood Brown. He gives them a dynamic in the offense that they haven't had in a while. He could be a big threat as a wide receiver, which is concerning, especially when you consider everything that just happened with Antonio Brown. It's really just kind of almost a pouring salt in the wound, which is just kind of a frustrating aspect of it.
Yeah, I feel like the Ravens draft was petty. I feel like the entire Ravens draft was just petty in spite of the Steelers. I don't know why, but that's how I felt. But regardless, the Ravens probably should have taken wide receivers with their first 3 picks in this draft because they needed wide receivers bad. All they had who played like meaningful snaps was Willie Snead, and I can't even remember the other guy's name. He had like 10 catches. It was like their wide receiver room was gross.
The Washington Redskins, after getting the steal of the draft and Dwayne Haskins at 15, get the second steal of the draft in pick number 26 with Montez Sweat, after a second opinion on his heart condition said that the first medical diagnosis was improper. So he was cleared on that account, and the Redskins got, by all accounts, one of the best edge rushers.
Yeah, the Redskins actually had a pretty solid draft. Not many people are saying that they had one of the best, but they did really good.
And not a whole lot going on around the end of the draft. DeAndre Baker was the first cornerback taken at the end of the first round. Were you surprised by that?
No. DeAndre Baker had the best coverage skills of all of the cornerbacks that we looked at. So it didn't exactly I wasn't surprised. I did think that after hearing all the rumors, I thought Rocky Sin was actually going to end up in the first round, and that was it. But I wasn't surprised to see Baker go first.
All right, let's speed up here. The Steelers didn't have a second-round pick. Just a couple things I wanted to talk about. First, Jawan Taylor goes number 3 in the second round to the Jacksonville Jaguars after I had him mocked going to the Jaguars at number 7 in the first round. So they got two first-round guys in their first 2 rounds, which I thought was great for them. And then second, the Lions took that linebacker from Hawaii that you would I keep forgetting how to say his name, but
Jelani Tavai.
Let's. I just want to get your thoughts on, first of all, Taylor going to the Jaguars, and then Tavai going to the Lions in the second round.
First of all, the Jaguars probably had the best draft this year. They had, because the same exact thing, the same thought. They got Josh Allen, which was supposed to be gone by their pick. Great, absolute. They were probably shocked that he was there, and he could help return Jacksonville to Saxonville because they obviously regressed really badly last year. They fell to like the bottom 10 in sacks. So I love that pick because Josh Allen's a very talented player. And then they still got the guy that they probably wanted in Jawan Taylor. And I thought that they had a great draft. Now, going to Tavai, that was a huge, huge reach. I really disliked it. When I talked about Tavai, I said I would like him in the 5th round. He was projected as a 4th rounder, and I didn't like that. I didn't think he played well enough. He's coming off an injury. I felt like his opponents weren't that strong, and you didn't get to see how he would perform at the combine because of his injury. So the Lions put a bet on like a mystery box here. So Jelani Tavai can surprise me, but I didn't like his tape that much anyway. I wasn't exactly thrilled with it, and the fact that he's coming off an injury, I wasn't a fan of him before the 5th round. So I think that the Lions really reached there. I wasn't a fan.
All right, things were pretty much status quo for the rest of the 2nd round. In the 3rd round, the Steelers had 2 picks, including the 2nd one in the 3rd round. They do go wide receiver, but they take Deontay Johnson. We were talking about this off-air, Austin. Kind of a surprise at the time because we hadn't heard much about him. We had obviously been talking mostly about David Sills and Miles Boykin. But Johnson was a guy that maybe we should have really been paying more attention to.
Yep, it was my mistake. I looked at his name and was like, nah, I'm going to look at Darius Slayton instead. Because Johnson was another guy that checked all the boxes like Slayton, Sills, and Boykin. I glossed over his name and just didn't revisit it. And I liked the pick. I think it was a solid pick there. After looking into him a little bit, I was pretty much a fan. He's got comparisons to Emmanuel Sanders, and that's pretty solid for me. And I think wide receiver is a really good need. However, I don't think it was the highest need, but apparently they had a 1st-round grade on him. And Steelers are traditionally really good at drafting wide receivers. So for now, I'm happy with it. If the Steelers are drafting a wide receiver, I'm mostly going to be happy with it because usually they hit. I mean, it hasn't always, like Sammy Coates, but I have more confidence in Johnson than Coates, that's for sure.
Not to mention, besides the comparison to Emmanuel Sanders, he's obviously being compared to Antonio Brown for being a guy that's the same size and weight pretty much, pound for pound, and another guy from the MAC. And a guy that's kind of slippery like him. I just watched one game going into this podcast, and when he's got the ball in his hands, he's kind of slippery. He's definitely not the player Antonio Brown is. That goes without saying. But he's definitely an interesting mix, and he can play all around the field. And I have a feeling the Steelers are going to use him as mostly an X receiver, but he can be moved around. And I think the Steelers... That's something else I noticed throughout this draft class is that they went with a lot of versatility in this draft, and Johnson was no exception. And although he was kind of initially thought to be a reach, the way things have seemingly broken down since then, it seemed as though the Buccaneers were planning to take him 4 picks later. And as a matter of fact, the Steelers, after they took him, the Buccaneers traded down with the Los Angeles Rams. They traded that pick away. So it looks quite clearly that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wanted to take Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, apparently they called Drake and cursed him out, too. I don't know if he was exaggerating or not, but a story came out afterward. They said, yeah, the Bucs called and literally cussed at him. That's how he said it. So I found that funny. So that made me like him a bit more, that this guy was desired by a lot of teams. And apparently what really pushed Steelers over the edge is that Drake said he had the best interview he's ever seen in all his years of doing this, all the pre-draft visits and such. He said that Johnson had one of the best interviews. He's one of the best talkers. So the Steelers fell in love with his personality as well. So I like a good guy that's going to be a good locker room hat, a leader. So I was okay with this pick. I like this pick.
And we already know he doesn't have to contribute right away. Interesting to note, though, he was a first-team all-conference punt returner and second-team kick returner. He can still contribute on special teams. Does this signal trouble for Eli Rogers and or Ryan Switzer? Because I think it very well could.
I think so. I think Eli Rogers is at the biggest risk because Ryan Switzer is a very efficient punt returner. However, Eli Rogers just kind of can do kick returns. He can just be put out there. But, so he's not really efficient at it. I'm sure that the kick return job is still up in the air because even Ryan Switzer isn't good at kick returning for whatever reason. He's only good at punt returning. So I'm sure they're going to probably test Johnson on the kick return unit and see if he works out because the Steelers haven't really had a good kick returner in a very long time, it feels like.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot. The receiver room just got a lot more crowded, basically. So, time will tell. I like that pick as well. And for those who were saying the Steelers reached on Johnson, they were not saying that about pick number 84, which of course was Michigan State cornerback Justin Lane. So Lane was a big physical cornerback in college. I looked at him. You might remember, I didn't love him. I didn't hate him. You like the size, you like the physicality. Questions about his long speed and his overall just ability to change, flip those hips. I think it's warranted, and I think the way it looks is that he's probably not ready to be a full-time starter right now, but then again, he shouldn't have to be.
No, the Steelers have the three right now, and Mike Hilton, Joe Hayden, and Steven Nelson. So Lane is just going to be probably an improvement on on Artie Burns, Brian Allen, and Cameron Sutton. At least I hope. I think that with some time sitting on the bench, he'll develop into a better player maybe, but for now, I like him as a developmental player. I thought he was a good pick because I thought cornerback was a need that was up and coming with Mike Hilton only having one more year left, and then Joe Hayden only having one more year left, and Nelson's only on a 2-year deal, and Artie Burns is definitely not the answer. Neither is Brian Allen. So this cornerback room needed some help for years going forward.
I'll have to look at more tape, but from what I was looking at, I'm just not sure about his viability as his upside I don't think is crazy high. I think he could be a starter, but I don't think he's going to be. I think that long speed is a question mark, and I don't see him being anything more than a guy that stays on his side,
That's fair.
But he does play man coverage well. I think it's a good move for the Steelers. I think, another guy just like Brian Allen was a receiver, actually played receiver his senior year at times. So he's still learning the position, too. That's the important thing to remember with Justin Lane.
Yeah, so he could have some ball hawking skills from the cornerback position.
He didn't have a ton of interceptions, too, but, again, we know that not having a ton of interceptions doesn't always mean that you won't have them in the pros, and having a ton, like Gerard Holloman, doesn't always mean you'll have them in the pros either. So I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. We know he can make plays on the ball.
Yeah, no, he can totally. That's what the Steelers need too. They need a guy that can make plays on the ball, and hopefully he does turn out to be a guy that has success at the next level, like Denzel Ward did when he became a Cleveland Brown. Obviously, way higher draft pick, but still.
All right, the 4th round pick was another running back, so we're adding to a crowded running back room, but it's Benny Snell, the junior from Kentucky. So I had a feeling the Steelers were going to go running back sometime around the middle portion of the draft. Benny Snell was a name I had heard, but I had not really given much credence to. But he was a guy that basically was the most prolific running back in Kentucky history. You might remember the name Snell if you're an old-time NFL fan. His, I believe it was his great uncle, was the leading rusher of Super Bowl III when the Jets defeated the then Baltimore Colts in what was one of the greatest upsets in NFL history. So he's got NFL bloodlines running through him, and I watched one game of his really quickly. He's another big, powerful running back that the Steelers, typically love, and I'm not surprised by the pick, and I think the Steelers got a good player here, but I think you can question it a little bit in some aspects. But that being said, I think the Steelers got a good player, but I'm not sure how either he or Jalen Samuels get on the field, because it depends on who the Steelers like better as a backup to be the spelling back to Connor.
I agree. I like the player. I think Benny Snell was pretty good. I really liked where he was drafted. It was a pretty solid value pick. However, I felt like edge rusher was more important. And I don't know how many times I've harped on this on the podcast, but I know me and John have talked about this off the podcast a lot, is that I thought running back was not as big as a need as, let's say, edge rusher, cornerback, and wide receiver. And I think running back here was a reach because especially you have more proof with the backup running back with Jalen Samuels than you do, let's say, Ola Adaney or Anthony Chickillo. If anything, Anthony Chickillo proves you need more edge rusher depth. While, meanwhile, at running back, you actually at least had a game where you could say, wow, you could look at Jalen Samuels and say he actually had 2 or 3 decent games when James Conner was down, and you could feel comfortable with him. I know 3 games is a lot, but it's more than how I feel comfortable with the outside linebacker guy. Because after, let's say, just T.J. Watt gets hurt, what am I to expect? Like Oladeni didn't show much because he didn't get on the field, and Anthony Chickillo I know isn't going to be a good replacement for T.J. Watt. So, meanwhile, at least with Jalen Samuels, I had at least like 3 games where I could say, oh yeah, he had 154 yards against New England, one of the toughest opponents in the league that won the Super Bowl that year. So I wasn't happy with running back being drafted here, even though it's a good player. And I don't know when he's going to get on the field. I don't know if he's going to beat out Jalen Samuels. I guess maybe he will because he was drafted higher than Samuels was. I don't know if that's a good determinant of if he'll beat him out. But I just felt like it was a luxury pick that the Steelers probably shouldn't have made. And especially me, I gave a second-round grade to DeAndre Walker. And at this point, DeAndre Walker was still on the board in the 4th round, and I was like, please make me happy. And they didn't. They got a running back. So I also would have said that tight end was a bigger need here, too. I was kind of upset because my sleeper, in quotations, who I thought wasn't going to go to the 4th or 5th round, and Drew Sample went in the 2nd. So I don't even remember the tight ends that were here. So maybe the tight ends weren't that good, worth it. But I still think, because again, it's the same exact principle of what I just explained with outside linebacker. With tight end, the number 2 tight end, at this point, the Steelers hadn't selected the number 2 tight end. It was Xavier Grimble. And Grimble hadn't showed anything. Grimble has not shown absolutely anything. And just to reiterate, Jalen Samuels at least has shown that he could actually be competent. And not even just competent, he could be good. So I just think that running back was a luxury pick, just to wrap it up here.
Okay, so let's assume for a second that DeAndre Walker was not on the board. The remaining edge guys were Justin Hollins, Kingsley Kiki, and John Kaminsky. Furthermore, the only 2 tight ends that were on the board between that and the Steelers' next pick of Zach Gentry was Foster Moreau. So, of those 4 guys I just listed, would you have rather had them than Benny Snell if DeAndre Walker was not on the board?
I'm going to say no to the tight end because I wasn't a big fan of Moreau, and I think Gentry ended up a better pick. So I'll take back what I said about tight end. However, I think Kaminsky would have been a better pick. I think I would have liked Kaminsky to come join the Steelers. I mean, he came from a small school, Charleston, but I still think I would have liked him better than a running back there. And also, Hollins is way too much of a reach. Hollins went a little earlier than I expected. I had him in my mock as a 7th, so I wouldn't have reached on him. But Hollins is a similar play to Bud Dupree, so I'd actually at least consider it. But it would have been a hell of a reach, that's for sure. Benny Snell's a better player,
so
I will say.
You said you like the pick of Gentry over Foster Moreau?
Yes.
See, I have to completely disagree.
I didn't
with
like
that.
Foster Moreau's tape. I wasn't a big fan of him, and I was kind of preparing for the Steelers to end up taking him. And I thought Foster Moreau didn't offer much as a receiver and only as a blocker. And I felt like the Steelers needed a Jesse James type where they needed a second receiving tight end for 2 tight end sets. That's a better receiver than was a blocker, and that's exactly what Gentry is. Gentry's not a very good blocker. He needs to work on it, but he's a pretty good go-up-and-get-him kind of guy. So I was a fan of Gentry over Foster Moreau based on value and how I saw it.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I'm not even sure Gentry should make this team.
Really? You think he's that bad?
I don't know. I watched a little bit more of him, and I just think he's just... See, when I was looking at him pre-draft, I mentioned that he could be moved to receiver, and that's one thing, but he doesn't test well as an athlete. He only had 12 reps on the bench press. His vertical was a paltry 29.5 inches. When you're 6'8", that's really just not that good. Jesse James had a much better vertical. Based on what I think from what I've seen with Gentry, he's just not that good of an athlete. He can make plays in the receiving game. He did have 16 yards a catch last year, but he also dropped 6 passes last year. He dropped 3 passes in one game against Ohio State. 2 of them were on third down. And he did move. He was a quarterback. He was pretty quick. But when he added on that weight, he really slowed down. And I'm not sure that he's going to make this opening day team. I think that his best bet is a practice squad guy this year, and maybe he can turn into, I think at best, what Jesse James was the last couple years. I'm really I thought Zach Gentry was going to go undrafted, personally.
So are you saying that the Steelers are going to roll with 2 tight ends? Or are they going to, is a guy like Christian Scotland-Williamson going to make the roster, and the 3 tight ends are going to be Vance, Xavier Grimble, and Christian Scotland-Williamson? Or are they going to get a guy that's like cut by another team maybe after preseason?
Well, I was going to say, you want to know what I really think is I think they're going to do what they did a couple years ago when they traded for Vance McDonald, and every year they trade for somebody. Last year it was who was it last year? Who did they trade for?
Ryan Switzer.
That's right, it was Ryan Switzer. And I mean, in the past, you have Vance McDonald, you have guys like Justin Gilbert, to varying degrees of success. But I think the Steelers are going to look at their tight end room and say, just like they said a few years ago, this group is just not varsity enough, and I think they're going to have to go get someone else. I know I'm being kind of harsh. I didn't hate Zach Gentry. I don't think he's a guy that's going to be ready to contribute the way the Steelers want guys like this to contribute. He's so tall that it's counterproductive to him as a blocker. He really can't get any leverage on anybody. And there was one play in particular, which I'll show you after we get off Austin, against Michigan State, where he gets blown up into the backfield so quickly that he basically tackles his own running back in the backfield for like a 4-yard loss. And I know I'm being harsh, and I don't mean to quash your original enthusiasm, but I was kind of hoping for Foster Moreau instead, just because I thought Gentry could have been a 7th round pick or an undrafted free agent. Now that being said, I like to think that he can still add more weight, become a better blocker, and obviously when you're that tall, you have a pretty good catch radius, and if you can scheme him open, it's not like he's a terrible player either. He's got long arms, and he has solid production in college, so I don't hate him. I don't think he's going to help this year. So I kind of feel like even though a tight end was drafted, I don't know that it's going to help this year, if that makes any sense based on what I've just said.
Yeah, he wasn't a good value pick, is what I'm hearing. The value wasn't there. If he was a 7th round pick, you would have liked it better, is what I'm hearing. And he's not going to end up on the roster probably, and he was drafted in the 5th round, which is kind of high. But so I see what you're saying, and at this point, because I was because Steelers Depot has been posting a lot about him, and I was seeing, I was like, oh, this dude seems okay. So I didn't see this side. I knew he wasn't a good blocker, but I couldn't remember. I knew you looked at him. I just couldn't remember what you said about him. I totally would have digged Alize Mack in like the 6th round instead. Obviously, Alize Mack ended up with the Saints in the 7th round. Saints had a sneaky good draft. I hate them. But regardless, what's it called? So, yeah, at this point now I look at him like, wow, I really liked Alize Mack too. So he could have ended up with I wish he kind of ended up with the Steelers instead for a later pick. But it is what it is. I don't know who you would have picked with that 5th round pick anyway.
I don't know.
Regardless.
I thought the whole time Foster Moreau was going to be available, and when he wasn't, because when I saw the Steelers drafted him, I was like, wow, that seems kind of high. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, because I was at work at the time, I was like, well, Moreau has to be gone, because I figured if he was on the board, he was definitely getting taken.
Yeah, the Bengals messed this all up. I think the Bengals threw everyone for a loop. They took my man from Washington and Drew Sample in the 2nd round. And I think that messed up everything because I don't think anyone was expecting another tight end to be taken after Irv Smith until like the 3rd or 4th round. So I think that messed up how everything happened.
All right, but again, I feel like I was really hard on Gentry, and I don't mean to be that hard per se, but I feel like that kind of player could have been had later. But then again, I guess I really don't know. I'm just concerned that the Steelers, I guess I can't say that he shouldn't make the team, because right now he should make the team. But I feel like the Steelers are going to notice that there's going to be something that's going to need to be done to help improve, and we already know how bad with injury luck Vance McDonald has been. If McDonald gets hurt, do you really want Gentry or Xavier Grimble to be your number one?
No, not at all. And then 2 tight end sets are just miserable. Might as well throw all those plays out the window.
All right. Let's transition to Sutton Smith from Northern Illinois. Finally, that edge rusher, but I think at this point, I wasn't expecting a whole lot. You know, we saw Keon Adams a couple years ago. He's been, a guy that has struggled to crack the roster, dealing with injuries as well. I'm not sure that Sutton Smith is necessarily going to be any different, and that's not necessarily a shot at him. It's just, when you're drafting this late, you're not taking guys that project very well. But what he does have is production. He was a very good production-based linebacker, not unlike Tyler Matakevich.
Yeah, I liked what I saw after the fact. I had never even heard of Sutton Smith until he was drafted. So I found out everything about him and later, and I think he's a decent pick. I mean, it's a little late for edge rusher, like I said. I would have projected it. I would have rathered it come a little earlier. And Sutton Smith, even though the Steelers keep saying that he's an outside guy, does, to me, project like an inside guy. Yeah, I know that you disagree with that because people have said that he can't play an off-the-ball linebacker, but I don't know. His size worries me, and I mean his build. It's how he's built. I don't think he's going to last on the edge at the NFL level. I think he's going to probably end up being cut as well and be on the practice squad at least for a little. I mean, with the depth at outside linebacker, I'm not ruling him out as making the roster, but I feel like, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how he performs. I'm very excited for the preseason. Very, very excited to see how these guys perform. But I'm gonna basically hold off on Sutton Smith until I see him in the preseason. I know that's not exactly the best judgment anyway because it's not up against like the top tier competition, but still.
Well, yeah, I don't think that he necessarily fits in anywhere. To be honest with you. I think he could just be a special teams guy. And again, I don't hate that idea when you're picking this late, but I don't want fans to necessarily get their hopes up because they see his size and they're like, oh, that's not a detriment. James Harrison was that tall. Well, James Harrison was had a much different build, It's one thing to compare Ola Adeni to him when he's a similar type of athlete, but, we were talking beforehand, Devin Bush and Sutton Smith are basically the same player when you look at their height and weight, right?
Yeah, if you're just looking at height and weight, they're the same player.
But, I mean, it goes beyond that. I mean, Sutton Smith is a guy that just doesn't have the same build. And again, I don't want to get too much into it because I haven't watched his tape yet. But from what I understand, which again is very limited, he might not project anywhere besides special teams, and that's not always a bad thing, but don't get your hopes up too high for him, I guess is what I'm saying. But, hey, you know what? If you're going to take a guy with good production, that's, we've seen with Matakevich, that's not a bad thing when you've got a guy that knows how to make tackles. He's a solid special teamer, and maybe Sutton Smith will be as well. Isaiah Buggs from Alabama, he wasn't a starting defensive tackle at the beginning of the year alongside Quinnen Williams, but he ended up spending a lot of time on the side next to him with Quinnen Williams, and he actually finished with 9.5 sacks his last year. I think this is maybe the best defensive lineman the Steelers have brought in, during the offseason since Javon Hargrave 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's very interesting. After not taking an Alabama player since Deshae Townsend for 18 years or something ridiculous, 12 years. Then now back-to-back drafts, they get defensive linemen from Alabama. And you can tell how Carl Dunbar's effect on this team, how it's rippled because from that. Regardless, Buggs is a great pick. Buggs was expected to go in the 4th round, I think. I think he was projected as higher, and then he fell to the Steelers this late. I was happy. I think this is a really good pick. I think that he is going to fit in well, and I think he has a much better chance to make a roster than Joshua Frazier did. And it's going to be interesting. And this is a player I'm very excited to see in preseason because I think he has a very high chance to just make the roster just straight up with no more LT Walton, and Daniel McCullers can be challenged. And he's a defensive tackle and defensive end. He's played both. He's just a defensive lineman, so he's versatile. He might only be able to play defensive end at the NFL level, but it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. And I like this pick. I thought it was a very good pick in a position that probably needed to be addressed right here, and they got a very good value pick for it. A guy that probably could have gone earlier, but landed in their lap. I was happy with this pick.
One of only 3 seniors the Steelers took, but again, he was a guy that was productive. He played at a high level of college football. He had some good games at that level. And again, I think, come on, he's better than Joshua Frazier. And I'm not even saying that Frazier was a waste of a pick, because I didn't hate that pick last year in round 7, but I think it's quite clear that Isaiah Buggs is a better player.
Oh, 100%.
And Buggs is a guy that offers upside as a pass rusher, which in the Steelers' backups, that's something that has been sorely needed. I don't even remember. I don't think the Steelers have had a good pass rushing defensive lineman as a backup probably since the Steelers were running a 4-3 in the 1970s. I mean, I don't remember even on the Super Bowl winning teams back in the mid to late 2000s where the Steelers had a good pass rushing defensive lineman.
Yeah, it's been a very, very long time, and this is a very good pick. Like I said, high value.
And like you were saying, he should be. I wouldn't call him a shoo-in per se to make the roster, but I'd have to say he's the favorite, and over maybe someone like Casey Sales, right?
Yeah, he has a very high chance to make this roster.
I'm very excited to watch his tape. I don't know if you are.
Oh, I am. I think this is my favorite pick from day 3.
So I just checked out his NFL Draft and Combine page. I don't know if you've looked at it, but do you know who they compared him to?
No, I don't. Come
They compared him to Tyson Alualu.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's definitely not a bad guy to be compared to. But all right, let's move to the second 6th round pick. Ulysses Gilbert III, and this was a guy that the Steelers had some interest in later in the process. So Gilbert III, again, another small school guy from Akron. I didn't think the Steelers were going to take him after they picked Devin Bush, but it's not necessarily a bad thing to double dip at this position. This really signaled the end of John Bostic to me, was when they picked Gilbert as a second inside linebacker. He's smaller at 6 foot, 224, but he was a versatile guy. He played off the ball. He played a little bit in the slot. He was speedy. He was productive. I think strength concerns are going to keep him from being an every down guy. But I think I might have said this before, or if I didn't, I'll say it again. Maybe I've told you before, Austin. You'll have to let me know if I have told you. But I think his upside could be just an LJ Fort replacement, a guy that could be a situational player in passing situations.
Yeah, you did tell me that.
Do you think that would be accurate based on what little we already know about him?
Yeah, I think so, because I think the Steelers are, with this pick, we're attempting to find a guy that can help on special teams and such, which was what LJ Fort basically did, but LJ Fort ended up coming in on defense on special situations. I think this could be the same for Gilbert. I don't think Gilbert's going to actually end up making the roster, unfortunately. I do think he's going to end up as a practice squad guy. But, I think that the Steelers, it's depending on his special teams abilities, really. I think that if he's really good on the coverage team, I think that he could make it. But as of right now, I don't actually think he's going to make the roster. I think he's going to end up on the practice squad, which I don't have a problem with. I think that he's going to be a solid guy, maybe down the road to be a backup.
Well, because I was going to say, I feel like people usually cringe when they hear sending a guy to the practice squad, like we say it as though it's almost a certainty. But the fact of the matter is, when teams are cutting 40 players, when every team's cutting 40 players, it's hard to keep. You have to really, really want a guy to keep him on your practice squad. And considering the Steelers will have been the only team to have a look at him, assuming he's still on the team, and when they cut him throughout that process, I'd be shocked if Gilbert III gets taken by another team, unless of course he has a crazy preseason where he has like 5 picks and like 4 touchdowns or something, Yeah,
no, I don't think the practice squad is a bad thing for late round players. I think, if anything, it's a good thing to sit around and develop for a little bit, just kind of chilling there. So I don't have a problem with it. I still think the pick was a good pick. It offers the chance to have a better coverage team guy for special teams. Just try him out and see how he does.
All right, so the last pick, the 7th-round pick, was an offensive lineman. You said you knew it was coming. It did come. It was Derwin Gray. I wanted to say Derwin James, but the 6'4", 320-pound Maryland product. He's a big man. I mean, my goodness. I watched him play. I know it's easy to say because this is the closest guy we have to compare him to as far as size, but he just looks like a brute like Ramon Foster.
Yeah, he was that big?
I mean, he looked that big, at least in the pictures I was looking at. I haven't seen anything of him yet. This is a guy I know almost nothing about.
Yeah, I didn't know much about him either. I just found out about him afterwards that he likely projects more as a guard than a tackle, especially with how the Steelers have more depth at tackle, it feels, with guys like Gerald Hawkins and Chuck Okorafor kind of competing for jobs in Matt Filer. So it's going to be rough for him. I heard that that's the plan. The plan is to try him out at both positions, the guard and tackle position. And likely he's going to end up like another B.J. Finney or Chris Hubbard, just kind of chill and see if he develops into something good. I don't mean he is going to develop into something good like Chris Hubbard and B.J. Finney did, but I do think that he's going to just go the same route as those guys, end up on the practice squad, and maybe in 2 or 3 years he will end up as a guy that can make the roster when there's more room on the roster for offensive linemen. I knew the Steelers weren't going to leave this draft without an offensive lineman. I was surprised they didn't take one higher, actually. I thought they were going to take one in the 6th round, but I was okay with this pick. I didn't really think there was anyone better there. I mean, maybe at the time, Alize Mack was still on the board, and I was all about double dipping at the tight end position because I thought Xavier Grimble was replaceable as well. And I mean, I didn't really have much thought on Zach Gentry, but if we had this conversation earlier, I probably would have been like, yeah, let's go grab Alize Mack for some more insurance. But I mean, it's the 7th round. Really, they could have picked anything, and I would have been like, yeah, that's okay, because there's not much value on the board anyway.
Besides a long snapper, of course, right?
Of course, you can get the first long snapper if you wanted to get the best at the position.
26 bench press reps for Mr. Gray here.
I have no idea. I actually don't know.
He had 26 is what I'm saying. That's a lot.
That is pretty. Yeah, he's pretty strong, so he could develop into something good.
Yeah, and again, it's a developmental guy, but this will be Sean Surratt's first opportunity to prove himself as his own standalone offensive line coach.
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
I was saying this could be Sean Surratt's first opportunity as the offensive line coach to leave a mark and kind of start his own legacy as a good offensive line coach.
Oh, yeah, this would be the first guy that he could prove himself with. Take a late-round guy that he's possibly said that he liked and turn him into something special. And really, you see this in this draft. You saw, all the new position coaches get a guy. Like the Steelers typically do. When they get new coaches, they get a guy for that new coach. They really did that a lot in this draft.
Eddie Faulkner's already taken full control of that running back room. He already got a running back in the 4th round, not to mention his guy from North Carolina State last year before he came on. And, I was going to say before, my only real concern with the running back in round 4 is that Benny Snell is so similar to the running backs the Steelers already have. I knew when they took one they were going to take a back like him, but does it concern you that they only have the big, strong type of running back?
Not really. I'm still not about. I'm really still not. I think my biggest problem with the running backs is I don't accept the rotational room, even though the rotational room works really well. And I should probably get away from my track of thinking of having a workhorse. I just think that it's going to mostly be Connor out there anyway. Connor and maybe Samuels will come in for passing reps because Snell and Connor don't have the best hands. I mean, Connor got better, but still Samuels definitely has the best hands out of the group. But I don't know. I'm not really worried about the type that they like. It actually makes sense if one of them gets hurt that they have a similar style to whoever got hurt.
If it works, right?
Exactly.
All right, and then I guess just final thoughts on this year's draft, at least for the Steelers. So, I mean, obviously, like you go day by day. I know you love day one, you love day two. I guess I'm not gonna say necessarily give a grade, but like let's just go day by day. You love it, right? Like you love Devin Bush. I do.
Yeah, day one I thought was a complete success. I was very happy with that. The Steelers didn't give up as much as they could have to get Devin Bush. I mean, the Broncos asked for 2020 first rounder, so it could have been very, very worse. The compensation they needed, and I thought it was very good. So I love Devin Bush. I think that was a great pick.
Second round, you got Deontay Johnson, Justin Lane. I didn't love it as much as I love Bush, just because Devin Bush was my guy. But I still really liked day two.
Yeah, day two I thought was good. I was definitely good with day two. I felt like the Steelers still didn't do anything stupid, and I was like, yeah, they're addressing positions that they did need. They did need wide receiver. They did need cornerback, and they found some pretty good value in the third round, a guy that they deemed as first round value. So I have high confidence in Johnson panning out since they had a high grade on him. So I was happy with him, and Lane was pretty good. I was happy with Lane. We'll see how Lane develops. That's going to be interesting to watch.
Day three, let's kind of look at this pick by pick. I know you're not crazy about Benny Snell. I like Benny Snell. I think he's a decent ad, but I get why people like you would think, add someone else like an edge rusher or a tight end at this spot.
Yeah, day three I wasn't as happy about, and it starts with Benny Snell. Like you said, I think probably my least favorite pick based on what the Steelers needed. I mean, I was a little bit surprised because I was sidewinded. I thought that Bryce Love was going to fall a little bit further, and he didn't. He got into the fourth round and got picked by the Redskins. So a little bit earlier than the Steelers did, took Snell as well. So I guess that played into it maybe a little bit. However, I still think that edge rusher should have been addressed. I take back what I said about tight ends, obviously knowing who was still left there. But I don't know. Maybe even Byron Cowart. Maybe they could. I can't even say that because I love the pick of Isaiah Buggs later. So, I don't even want defensive line picks. So I guess at the end of the day, this is okay. It's just the position that really bothers me.
Zach Gentry. Again, I like the player. I don't like him there. I guess I can't complain too much about when he gets taken because theoretically where you're taken is your ceiling. But it's just I would have rather had Foster Moreau or rather they taken someone else sooner than that. Gentry, I think, is a number 3 tight end right now, and the Steelers are lacking a number 2. With an injury, a guy with an injury history at number 1. Max Williams is still a free agent. Just want to point that out.
Yeah, it's pretty rough out here. The pick I liked a little bit better before we had this conversation today. So, I mean, the Steelers needed to address tight end, but they probably should have just waited and got something else here, like a DeAndre Walker that was still on the board at this point. And I will harp on them forever as I watch DeAndre Walker's career in Tennessee.
Isaiah Buggs, we just talked about him. We both like him. I think that's a good rebound pick, at least in your eyes, from the first 2 picks in day 3. I liked him a lot.
Yeah, this is my favorite pick, and probably my second favorite pick of the draft from the Steelers, to be honest. I know I said I liked Johnson and I liked Lane, but this one had so much value, and I feel like he has a high chance to make the roster, and it's a really good pick, I think, as a very good backup. I was really happy with Buggs here.
He could make an impact almost right away. Ulysses Gilbert, I like that too. He's not going to be playing a lot, but he really shouldn't be either, not right away.
Yeah, it was a solid pick. I don't have a problem with it. I think he's going to end up as maybe a special teamer, but I think that he projects more as a practice squad guy that might develop into a backup later.
And then Gray, the 7th round pick, it's a low risk, high reward kind of situation. If he pans out, if he becomes a starter on your team for multiple years, that's a huge win.
Oh, yeah, that's a W. And the Steelers are like the best at that. Best in the league at developing offensive linemen. But, I mean, we'll see how that works out without Munchak now. So, yeah.
All right, and then overall thoughts on the draft itself. What surprised you the most?
Well, I don't know if I said it enough, or maybe I didn't even say it once, but DeAndre Walker falling to the 5th round hurt my feelings. I had a second-round grade on him. That was one of the biggest surprises for me. Daniel Jones going at 6. That was rough. That's pretty tough. Then other surprises, really, I was surprised to see some of the guys I looked at, like Julian Love fell to the 4th round. I was surprised by that. Drew Sample going in the 2nd, I already mentioned him. I was surprised by who I thought was a sleeper that wasn't going to go that early, went exactly where I had him in my head. I had him with a 2nd-round grade, and apparently the Bengals did too, in a position they didn't need. Other surprises, Drew Lock falling to the 2nd round. I mean, it was kind of projected in the later mock draft, but I think that was pretty surprising to me. Thinking of falling in the 2nd round, how far Greedy Williams' descent was. Oh my God. And Mac Wilson. Now I'm getting all thinking of Browns players now. Mac Wilson was like, in my head, he's going to be like, oh yeah, maybe an early 3rd rounder, possibly a late 2nd, and he fell all the way to the 5th. Greedy Williams was like, from the beginning of like mock drafts for this year, he went from like the 4th pick in the 1st round all the way to pick number 17 in the 2nd. I was so surprised that he lasted so long. Sean Bunting from Central Michigan went before him, and a bunch of other cornerbacks. I believe Trayvon Mullen, who I was high on, went before him. Rocky Sin, all those guys. Obviously, DeAndre Baker went in the 1st, and then Byron Murphy was the 1st pick in the 2nd round. So it was kind of interesting to me that Byron Murphy fell so long. And the Browns also are another team that has a really good draft because they got a lot of value out of their picks, in my opinion. But, what were some surprises for you?
Oh, real quickly, I had Greedy Williams going to the Steelers in the 1st round. I'd like to point out that the Draft Network in its drafting simulator would routinely have Greedy Williams with the number 2 pick, and I just want to say that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that's not how this works. No, I guess it doesn't auto-update. It probably isn't. It's not smart enough to keep updating on what teams are saying about players or where their draft stock is. So it probably is still doing it from like whenever they set it up to say, yeah, like Greedy Williams is the top cornerback in this draft. And like I said, mock drafts at first had him at like going at 4. Like the first couple mock drafts that came out after the Super Bowl had him going on really early, so it probably hasn't updated since then.
What about Ben Banigou in the 2nd round?
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was a reach as well. Jelani Tavai and him I was surprised. Ben Banigou, I thought he was projected as a 5th or 6th rounder on NFL Network. I was like, oh no, I think he's better than that. He's probably a 4th rounder. And then the culture like, nah, he's a 2nd rounder. I was like, oh, okay, Cole, you do you. And I personally don't like the pick. I think it is a little bit too much of a reach. I saw Ben Banigou as a really good developmental player because he has a lot of athletic skills and such. I thought his combine helped his. It obviously helped his stock because he was projected as a 5th round pick. But I didn't see him going all the way into the 2nd round. I wasn't a fan of that. That's really it. I'm trying to think because I know I sent you more stuff on the draft day. I know I said, this guy, I can't believe this guy went here. This guy went here. I know another surprise for me. I looked at inside linebacker Dakota Allen, and I was like, this guy's bona fide undrafted, and he went in the 7th round. I mean, that's not a big surprise, I guess, but he went to the Rams, and I didn't think he was going to get drafted. You know what a big surprise was for me? We looked at it early, but when I looked at Iosoa Opeta, the offensive guard from Weber State, I was like, this guy, his combine was ridiculous. He had like a really high bench press. He just had a really good combine. I was like, this guy went from a 6th round pick to probably a 5th round pick, and then he went undrafted. I have no idea what happened. That really surprised me. Same with Bo Benshaw, your prospect. I thought he was going to get drafted, didn't end up getting drafted. Almost all the interior linemen we looked at went undrafted. I don't know if you noticed that. Almost every single one. I think there was one that got drafted, and it was Cody Ford.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. Cody Ford's actually a tackle, so he doesn't even count towards that. It was just Javon Patterson, who was a 7th round pick of the Colts.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I don't know why. In my head, I was like, oh, yeah, Cody Ford's a guard. No, he's not.
What about David Sills going undrafted?
Oh, that was a surprise as well. I had about a 4th-round grade on Sills. I didn't like him as much as other people, but I still had the Steelers draft him in the 3rd round to make a reach pick because I thought that it was either him or Miles Boykin, and obviously we were both wrong. But I was surprised he went undrafted. They had some really good undrafted free agents, Buffalo. They got Tyree Jackson as well, the quarterback, and then they got David Sills. So they did pretty well.
Hakeem Butler in the 4th round of the Cardinals. I thought Butler, there was rumblings that he could be a 1st-round pick at the end.
I don't know. I wasn't really high on Butler. I won't lie to you. And like I said, I think the Cardinals messed up their draft. They took way too many wide receivers. It was a luxury pick that they shouldn't have made.
I'm not going to lie, I was very sad when Chase Winovich was drafted by the Patriots.
It was a very sad day. He wanted to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, and it didn't work out that way.
The Jefferson Hills product goes to play with the enemy. He seems like Rob Ninkovich 2.0 to me, and that's frustrating.
It is pretty frustrating. We'll see. We'll see how it works out.
I think that just about covers it as far as surprises go. How about Mitch Wishnowsky, the punter, going in the 4th round to the San Francisco 49ers?
Yeah, that's a little rough. I like to stand put on that no special teams player should be drafted until at least round 5. But, I mean, I guess he was the first draft pick to sign a contract, so I guess that's something, because he's the first one that signed a contract out of all the other draft picks, so I guess good for San Fran. But I thought that was hilarious that they took a kicker that wasn't even like I didn't even think like he was one of the best kickers coming out. I mean, he won the award for the best one, but he didn't really scream to me that he's going to be like a NFL kicker. So I thought that he projected well. I think I had him as a 7th round pick because I thought he was the best. I'm sorry, I keep calling him a kicker. He's a punter. I think I had him as like a 7th round pick, and I was just laughing because I have a 49ers friend, and I immediately messaged him. I was like, you guys took a punter in the 4th round, and it's just funny to me. I just think of Robert Aguayo now when teams reach on special teams too early, like when the Bucs took him in the 2nd round, and the poor kid's career just didn't go anywhere close to where it was expected.
That being said, do you have any closing thoughts on the 2019 draft, the draft process, before we start to turn our attention to the 2019 mini camps and preparing for the season?
Sure, I got a few things actually. So first of all, the Steelers have 10 undrafted free agents they brought in. The first one that we got word of was Drayvon Askew Henry, the safety from West Virginia. After that, they got Ian Berryman, the punter from Western Carolina. Then they got Garrett Brumfield, the guard from LSU. Jay Hayes, the defensive end from Georgia. Fred Johnson, the guard from not from Georgia, from Florida. Trayvon McMillan, a running back from Colorado. Alexander Myers, a cornerback from Houston. Chris Nelson, a defensive tackle from Texas. Trevor Wood, a tight end / long snapper from Texas A&M. Matthew Wright, a kicker from Central Florida. And then they got Jay Hayes, the defensive lineman from Georgia. Along with those guys, they also had some camp invites. Let's see if I can find them. Okay, here we go. So they have rookie tryout invites, and the first one is Devlin Hodges, the quarterback from Stanford. And then they got Cardone Johnson, running back from James Madison. Steve McShane, the running back from Western Illinois. Millen Richard, the tight end from Clemson. We're going to skip that for now because I don't know how to say his last name. Dwayne Wallace, the offensive line from Kansas, and I guess I just skipped it for 1 second. I'm going to try my best here not to butcher this, but Drew Desjarlas, offensive line from Windsor. So those are some of the guys from tryouts. Do any of these names mean anything to you? Because I'll just to say it, none of these names were any guy I looked at. None of them even rung a bell for me.
I'm sorry. I need to hear that last name again. I think it's Desjardins.
Desjardins? Where's the N?
I'm pretty sure that's how you say it because I remember is that guy from Canada?
I don't know. It says he's from Windsor College.
Windsor.
I don't know where Windsor is.
in Ontario.
Oh, so I guess he is. Oh, the French are the worst. I don't mean that literally. Just the names. Desjardins or Nay. Desjardins. Oh, why are things pronounced this way, Fran?
What is it? What is it? DESJARDINS?
LAIS.
Oh, then good lord, I have no idea. My goodness.
Yeah. So I hope. It's like when Ola Sunkenmi Daney was the guy last year. I was like, please don't work out, and then Ola Daney worked out. But now I can say his name. So hopefully, if Desjardins works out, that's what I'm going to call him for now. I'll actually learn his name like I did with Ola Sunkenmi.
All right, that's enough of the spelling part of our podcast. I think we can move on from that.
Yeah, I think we're good. But
right.
So that was it for that. But the other thing I had was, who do you think out of all the teams had the best draft?
Oh, good! My goodness, I haven't even looked at everybody's draft. All I'm gonna say is I think the Cardinals had the worst, or one of the worst. Another team I'm gonna say that had a bad one, just because not necessarily what happened with the draft itself. The Chiefs, the Kansas City Chiefs with Tyreek Hill.
Oh yeah, they had a bad time. They did not have a good time, and they literally drafted a wide receiver in response to what happened.
That looks like a really ugly situation, doesn't it?
It is an ugly situation. I think he's going to be put on the commissioner's suspended list or the I can't remember the name.
The exempt list.
The exempt, yeah, that's what I was looking for. It's pretty rough. For me, though, I think that the Titans had one of my favorite drafts. Not just because of DeAndre Walker, he plays a role, but actually looking at it because I started tracking like all the draft picks we looked at and such, and I was like noticing, I was like, dang, the Titans took a lot of guys that we both liked. The Titans took A.J. Brown in the first round, and while I didn't like him for the Steelers because he was a predominant slot player, I literally came out and said that I think he could be the best wide receiver from this draft class with his route running, because his route running is elite. His route running is really good. So I thought the Titans did really well there. Then they went on to get Amani Hooker in the fourth, DeAndre Walker in the fifth. They got David Long Jr., who scouts were talking about him like he was a third-round pick in the sixth round. So they got a really good inside linebacker in the sixth. I thought the Titans had a very, very good draft. Same with the Browns. I thought the Browns did solid even without their first-round pick. Like we went over, they already got Greedy Williams in the second, and then they were able to get Mac Wilson in the fifth. I thought they did solid. They got I didn't like the linebacker that they took in is it the third round or second round? He was from BYU. I forget his name. I thought that was a bit of a reach, but still. And like I said, okay, so this one I actually haven't looked past their first two picks, but based on their first two picks, the Jaguars had a really good draft. Actually, I know that they got a quarterback that's considered really, really underrated in the sixth round. I think his name is Minshew from, I think it was Northwestern, but I'm not sure. But I still love Jawan Taylor in the second for them because the Eagles protected them in the first, and they were able to get Josh Allen. Josh Allen was such a good player. That really wraps it up for me. Like I can't really think of another team that really had a really good draft other than some of those guys. Oh, the Saints. The Saints. I'm sorry, I forgot about the Saints because the Saints didn't have like a pick in the first two rounds, and then they were able to get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in the fourth and Alizé Mack in the seventh, and they made the most out of like the four picks they had. Really, really good use of their picks. I think they did really well here.
I'd like to point out the Jaguars' third pick, they got Josh Oliver, which was one of their biggest positions of need, by the way.
Yeah, so they did pretty good. I forgot about that. That's from San Jose State, the tight end, right?
Yes. Yes, you are right.
Okay, yeah, cool. It sounded familiar. I just wanted to make sure. But so they did pretty good. I think the Jaguars had a really good draft. I mean, based on the first two picks, I thought that they did excellent. They got two top 10 picks in the first and second round, in my opinion. That Jawan Taylor only fell because people were worried about his injury. So I thought they did well.
And yeah, the guy I was most shocked about had to be Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, by the way. I might have considered taking him in the first round.
Yeah, he had some pretty good tape. I remember you talking about him and saying that he was he was your favorite guy.
He definitely was. I really liked him. So I think he's a good fit with New Orleans too. But all right, I think that wraps up everything as far as the draft goes. I guess the big thing that we didn't get to talk about though was the Ben Roethlisberger extension. He got a 2-year extension on top of his own 1-year remaining deal. I was stupid and closed out of the tab, so I'm now reopening it. But it was a 2-year extension through the 2021 season. A signing bonus of $37.5 million. It's worth over $68 million over the next 2 years. By all accounts, should be the last one he signs in Pittsburgh. I'm not going to say it is because, we thought he could have been retiring after 2016, and now it looks like he could play through 2021, if not longer. So I'm glad they got it done when they did, though, and it's definitely well-deserved.
Yeah, I think it's good, but I think it just it speaks about the mishandling of the draft last year where they took Mason Rudolph in the third. Such a waste of a third-round pick. Now you look at it, because what happens now? What happens with Mason Rudolph? I mean, I like Ben Roethlisberger's extension. See, just to talk about that first before we go into Mason Rudolph, I probably should have saved that for a second, but a lot of people hated the Ben contract extension. A lot of people, not outside of Steelers, they thought it was terrible. I don't understand. I don't think people understand how hard it is to get a franchise quarterback and how Ben is still playing at a high level. I mean, his year last year was above average. It wasn't great. He led the league in passing and stuff. He just had a high amount of interceptions, which held him back. And I mean, you kind of expect that because his touchdown to interception ratio wasn't much. His attempts per interception ratio wasn't different from his previous years, but he's still playing at a high level. And I don't think people understand that with salary cap going up, that quarterbacks keep getting paid more. And I was just happy that he wasn't the highest paid quarterback. I thought that was a win in my book, that he didn't have to overpass Russell Wilson. And I think he wasn't even the second. I think Aaron Rodgers still had it. I think he ended up at third. And now I think people are going to feel better about it when they see Philip Rivers get his extension, because Philip Rivers' extension is probably going to project to be more than that. So there's that as well. But moving on to the second part that I started with as the first part, what happens with Mason Rudolph, in your opinion? What do you think happened?
Well, I don't really know. Unless if he balls out, I don't see how he could go anywhere. Why would a team trade for him?
I agree. I think he's just stuck to Pittsburgh at the moment, and it kind of sucks. Pittsburgh's kind of wasting what could be his career by leaving him as just a backup. And, I mean, it's a business, so I guess it is what it is. But I kind of feel bad. The kid isn't going to be able to start. He's going to have to sign a prove-it deal first before he can get a real contract. If he is good, I mean, he could end up being bad, and being a backup was good for him, that he got paid and didn't have to do anything. But regardless, Steelers gave him a first-round grade, and I don't know. It's just I feel bad. I think that it just kind of, again, it was mismanagement. They shouldn't have drafted him in the first place. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're looking at him, best case scenario, Roethlisberger retires and you're playing on a 1-year deal, because where else are you going to go? I mean, Pittsburgh is basically where he has to go.
Pretty much. It's real. He's kind of stuck with that. I feel bad again.
I mean, geez, let's talk again about the Steelers quarterbacks between Ben Roethlisberger and Tommy Maddox. I mean, shoot. You've got Mark Malone, Bubby Brister, Neil O'Donnell, who's the only other player to ever take the Steelers to the Super Bowl, Tommy Maddox, Cordell Stewart, Mike Tomczak, Kent Graham. A lot of names I'm sure you're very familiar with, Austin, right?
Yes, only Hall of Famers. That's it. All those guys are Hall of Famers.
Do you recognize any of those names?
Maddox. Yeah, I recognize Maddox and Bubba Brister, but other than that, not really, no.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers, it's really a testament to how good the Steelers were at staying competitive all those years when they didn't have a good quarterback like that. But I feel like that's something that can't really be done nowadays with the way the quarterback position, how important it is. So having a good one, it's important to keep. And I like Mason Rudolph, but I guess it's really a question now. I guess, play it year by year now with Rudolph, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess you see what he does. I mean, I don't even know what to hope for in the preseason. Do you hope he does bad in the preseason, or do you hope he does really good? I guess I hope he does really good because he's just going to end up as the backup for the most part, and then because I guess there's no other option. I guess you don't want your backup to be bad. I don't even know. I don't even know what I want out of him because do I want the Steelers to hold on to him? Sort of, but like the only way they're going to basically hold on to him is if he has good preseasons, because that's like the only time he's going to be able to play. And then if he has good preseasons, though, he's going to be able to sign a contract elsewhere when the Steelers probably really won't be able to sign him. So it's an interesting situation.
So what happens mid-season next year when Ben Roethlisberger goes down, misses a month with a knee injury, and Mason Rudolph lights it up?
That would be interesting if that happens, that's for sure. I think the Steelers, you know what would probably happen then? I don't think anything happens at that point. I think Mason Rudolph gets franchise tagged.
Oh, they give him the Nick Foles treatment?
They give him the Nick Foles treatment, and that's the 1 year prove it deal. Even though it's very expensive for a prove it deal, I think quarterbacks are high demand always. Everyone's always looking for. There's always going to be a team looking for a quarterback, and anyone that has the potential, has shown potential to be a good quarterback, is going to be desired. It doesn't matter. Even if it's only 2 games of showing. If that's all they showed and that's all they got, a team's going to be willing to bet on it. So that's really how if that happens and Steelers see it, basically, they get to see it firsthand, I think that would end up as what would happen. He gets the franchise tag that season.
So let's say the Steelers punt on Rudolph in a couple years or at some point down the line. When do they take another quarterback to replace Ben?
I would have to be that year, because unless Ben thinks he can play after this. They said they don't guarantee this is Ben's last contract, so I guess it depends on Ben. But I would think that at that point it's time you have to take one right there. Even if Ben comes back for 1 year, I'd rather have. I don't like I know that it's not how the NFL works anymore. It's more like if you take a first round pick, they're going to play. I would much rather a first-round pick just sit and develop for a year, learn the system, really just redshirt their first season, and then get to start. I think it gives them a head start and makes them better, but that's just not how the NFL works anymore, so I don't know if that would work.
Are you sure it worked pretty well for Patrick Mahomes?
It did work. Actually, that's not true. Patrick Mahomes got to start. Oh, wait.
He started 1 game at the end of the year that was meaningless.
You're right. Okay, no, I'm confused. I don't know. I just confused myself because at first I don't know why in my head you were the counter argument, and I was like, I don't know. I forgot how Patrick Mahomes worked, and he redshirted his first season, and that worked out perfectly, like you said. So yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't happen all the time. Usually, if a team needs a quarterback, they're starting him immediately if they need one in the first round anyway.
There are examples that support both sides, but we could spend a ton of time getting into that and breaking that down. But I think we're good to wrap this one up as we approach the hour-and-a-half mark. It's now Wednesday morning.
Sounds good to me.
All righty. Well, as always, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. As always, if you have any questions, please email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. We'll answer your questions on the show. And please feel free to check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. We post our episodes there and links to our various social media platforms. And Austin, it's on to the draft class of 2020. You ready to start watching more tape?
I am ready to watch more tape. Here we go.
We should make a big board like in a month or two, or like when the first games are played in college. We should make a big board, and then we should compare it at that point to the end of the NFL season, and we'll kind of look back and say, Are these guys still there? Because I guarantee you half of them will change. Like, half of them will become, like, guys that aren't getting drafted. Some of them probably won't even declare. That's probably what it'll be.
Yeah, that's exactly what'll happen.
All right, well, until next time, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Have a great night.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.